Son, you got a panty on your head. Just drive fast, eh?
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 132 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're talking with Brian Hayner, a guitarist turned stand-up and part of the Eagles of Liberty comedy tour. He's got a great story to tell about his career evolution, plus a warning for those who think right-leaning views won't impact their next gig. You're probably wrong. Bill Burr, Sebastian Maniscalco, Dave Chappelle. Three very funny men, three very pointed attacks on cancel culture, and just about everyone's taking notice. They attacked the PC mob in very different ways, but each landed some pretty serious body blows. Maniscalco did it first by hosting the wokest of woke events, the MTV VMAs. His attack on safe space culture proved edgier than any twerking pop star. That's for sure. Talk about taking it to the enemy. And then Chappelle's Netflix special, Sticks and Stones, made media critics lunge for their stuffies and safe spaces. And it's about time. Burr followed up with a full-on assault on those who want to cancel people for saying, quote-unquote, the wrong things. Boy, is it glorious. But what happens next? At the moment, a Saturday Night Live player who just joined the show, probably the event of his lifetime, professionally speaking, is on the cusp of being fired for saying all the wrong things not too long ago. They caught him on tape saying things that were sexist and racist and offensive and all sorts of things that you really don't want to say in public, but he is a comedian. He is trying to push the envelope, which is his excuse. Will he survive? Well, by the time this podcast goes live, he may already be on the unemployment line. Now, Burr and Chappelle and Maniscalco definitely struck a blow against the PC culture, no doubt. But this is a long fight, and it's one that's far from over. But at the very least, someone is finally standing up to the woke scolds. And that's a hell of a start. And now here's the HiT tweet of the week. This week's winner is Mark Ruffalo. This guy's green on and off screen. We know him as the Hulk in the Avengers movies, but he is extremely environmentally conscious, or at least he pretends to be. Who knows what he's like when you check out his electric bill, but that's a story for another day. But for now, he's a huge fan of that Green New Deal, the AOC catastrophe. Yes, he's bought into the silliest thing I've ever read on the political landscape, but hey, it's one that even his fellow leftists are a little bit leery of supporting, officially speaking. Here's his tweet plea on the deal's behalf. The Green New Deal will get us to a green and just climate future, but it's important that we ask our members of Congress to support it. Join me in sending a message to Congress right now. Well, sorry, Mark. They already had a chance to support it in Congress, and it went down in flames. Your fellow Democrats said, well, nah, we're good. So, I want to look into that.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
I recently received a few emails from a fan of the podcast. She said some nice things about the show, which is obviously more than welcome. But she also weighed in on some pop culture issues, and I thought, that's interesting. There's a lot of insight and passion here. So we went back and forth on email, and I thought, maybe I should have her on the show. Now, it turns out that Jane Doe, not her real name, is a pretty smart pop culture consumer, and I think that kind of voice is often missing in our society. You know, yes, people can kind of weigh in on the comment sections of a web page and things, but as far as the mainstream media goes, I don't think voices like Jane get a lot of attention, but I thought we can at least partially fix that by having her on the HitCast. I hope you enjoy our spirited back and forth. Well, Jane Doe is not your real name. I know that's a shock, but before we begin, I just wanted maybe you can share a little bit why you wanted to use a fake name, because, you know, people have different reasons for doing it, and we're living in complicated times. Just for listeners, why did you decide to kind of go that route? And we'll kind of get into the heart of the conversation.
Well, there are two reasons why I do prefer to use a pseudonym. One of them is I am a bit shy because we live in a world where if you put your name online, suddenly everyone around the globe knows who you are. So I do prefer a bit of privacy. And because I consider myself a fan of science fiction and fantasy, I do use a pseudonym when I'm writing into a fan-related podcast, when I'm writing fan fiction or on my blog. So just for a little bit of privacy's sake, and a bit shy. And the other reason is because my career does not have anything to do with it. I'm not a professional journalist or a public speaker, not like Ben Shapiro or Dennis Prager who want to get their name out. I'm just trying to offer my perspective as a consumer of media.
Excellent. And that's perfect. And I really want that perspective. So, and by the way, none of us can compare to Ben Shapiro, who spits out words like nobody's business. So I will never put myself in that category, thank goodness. But, Jane, you reached out to me recently and we've kind of had some emails back and forth, and I appreciate the dialogue you've had. That's why I wanted to talk to you. And you talked about how, listen, we've all seen a lot of Democrats evoking the Holocaust and concentration camps with some of the president's policies. And I think even if you despise the president's policies, I found that well beyond the pale. But you also say that there are some Hollywood stories that are coming out that are doing something similar, or even actors doing something similar. So I just wondered, what have you seen that's out there that you can kind of share? Because I think it's important to kind of talk about this element of pop culture too.
Yeah, there are several examples that I've noticed in the science fiction, especially fantasy worlds. They sort of add up. And one of them, for example, is like you've discussed before, the issues with the new Star Wars, how suddenly all white men are evil, how all business is bad. That horrible Canto Bight scene, that was just ridiculous. Personally, I preferred the scene in Solo where they had to go to the fancy yacht. I thought that was a much cooler one. And Star Trek, you had this issue with the Klingons first, and there's this whole subtlety that it's about nationalism, and it's all related to the president. You have J.K. Rowling. She has this new prequel series, and she's mentioned in press releases, it's all about fascism. And the fans are saying, well, you kind of did that with your Harry Potter saga. That was all about the pure blood or not. And people are, and the audience members, those of us who are buying tickets, are kind of thinking, why are you invoking things from the past nowadays? We know things aren't exactly the way, but Hollywood seems to be in this bubble of, oh, the past is repeating exactly itself. You have to wake up. And the audience is not like that. Honestly, when you're an average person and you work hard all day, you want to go home and watch a movie, you just want to be entertained. And we get the impression we're being lectured to. And at some point, we're not having fun anymore because they have to use these drastic words. Doctor Who does this as well. They had a new evil bad guy who was a politician. Of course, he was a capitalist and American, and he's running for president. What I really want to get to, at the point where the line was crossed for me, was a series from the CW, the shows. They have Arrow, The Flash. I don't know if you've watched any of those.
I have not, no.
Okay, so I started watching Arrow a few years ago, and it was fun. There was The Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, and they had a 4-part called Crisis on Earth X. The idea was there was this one planet where the Nazis won the World War, and they decided to invade the superhero planet, and we get to see some of the superheroes became Nazis. But what got to me was the imagery. At one point, they are transported to an authentic concentration camp, and there's barbed wire, and they're wearing striped pajamas, and one heroine mentions that she's gay, and she gets slapped, and another mentions she gets Jewish, and she's put in front of a firing squad. And it just took me so far out of the story. I'm thinking, you have time travel. You have people who can run faster than the speed of light. Why are you doing this? And it was jarring, and I was appalled and sick, and I thought, how dare you cheapen history, the people who endured that, the people who did not survive, by trying to educate people through a sci-fi show. And at one point, somebody made the comment, "Make America Aryan again." I thought, okay, that's it, I'm done. At that point, you've crossed the line, Hollywood.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think there's science fiction has often been used to talk about serious issues, and I think that's welcome and wonderful. But I think what you're seeing now is that these storytellers can help themselves. And when they use a line like that, it's such a tell, but also it just takes you dramatically out of the story. It's so obvious, it's so overt. And hey, if you want to send a message, then do it in a way that if you don't even notice it, or maybe you reflect on it maybe minutes later, if it becomes so clunky, I think it really defeats the purpose on multiple levels. But, you're a Jewish person, and I think that perspective is often missing in our culture because you're trivializing the Holocaust, whether it's a Democrat saying it or a clunky TV show saying it. Is there outrage within the Jewish community, but it's not being heard? Any sort of sense in that regard?
This one is a little harder to pinpoint. I would have to say that the truth is, I think most people who work in Hollywood, Jewish people who work in Hollywood, are liberals, so they may not mind this sort of thing, or that's just the way they see it. I'm more conservative. I identify as Orthodox. And believe me, some Orthodox people don't like the president. Maybe there's just not much of an outcry because you mentioned on your podcast that there are probably less people who are open about being conservative in Hollywood. So maybe some Jewish people are afraid if we open our mouths and say this, we're afraid of rocking the boat. There's always that underlying fear that if we open our mouths, someone's going to say something. And once on YouTube, though, I did call out about the crisis on Earth X, and sure enough, there's always somebody who's nasty online. Somebody said, "You're just bringing it up because you want your pound of flesh. How dare you use it? Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. You're just trying to monopolize on the suffering of your ancestors." But at the same time, there were two very nice comments. People said things like, "You articulated very well what you said, and I agree with you, and what you said proves our Jews are very smart." Mm-hmm. I think because we're afraid of our words getting distorted or intentions, people say, then what are we supposed to do? How do we use the Holocaust to educate people? And I would say use it to educate people, not for entertainment, or in the case of AOC, don't use it to woo people to your political side. We may see this more on the left. I would say people on the right, please be careful not to do the same thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's always going to be sort of ill-tempered thoughts on social media, but it is important to have that dialogue. Given the fact that I think Hollywood is going to the extreme, part of it is, I think you hit on a good point. If you're a Jewish celebrity and you say, you know what, I don't agree with the comparisons to the Holocaust, then that in a weird way is like defending the president, and that is completely unacceptable in that community. So that may sort of make them want to stay quiet. One other thought, I like to kind of add positives and not just kind of dwell on the negatives. But you said you kind of had revisited a movie from a few years ago, not too long ago, called Freedom Riders, and it starred Hilary Swank. And it came out. I don't think it got a lot of buzz, not a lot of box office. But you said that was a sort of a more fair, a more thoughtful way to incorporate some of the Holocaust themes into a story. Maybe just share a little bit about that movie because I never caught up with it, and I kind of regret that right now.
Oh, it's definitely worth going back and rewatching. I remember seeing it on an airplane going to visit friends, and I got off the plane. I said, "Have you heard of this movie?" And all my Jewish friends said, "Oh, yeah, we have. We loved it." And we're thinking, what is it that made this movie resonate with us? And I think the end is it's not a film strictly about the Holocaust. It was being used in a school effectively. You have Hilary Swank playing Aaron Gruwell, who's dealing with these inner city kids, and society has given up on them. They're all in gangs. But I think first of all, the material is treated with respect in the context of the story. There's a scene where they go to a Holocaust museum and she gestures for this boy to take off his baseball cap. He does not argue with her. He does not glare. He respectfully takes it off. And you see the kids are not laughing or joking. The message is sinking into them that it's not about them coming from different backgrounds or different races. It's not about, well, we have nothing to live for, so we might as well shoot each other in a gang fight. It's not about changing society. It's about changing yourself and your mindset. And she tells this to them. They say, well, we just can die and that's it. She says, you're going to be 6 feet under and that's it. Everyone's going to forget about you. So she does turn things around. She gets them new books that they're proud of reading. She encourages them to write, to speak their minds. And to bring up another film, Life is Beautiful, she does make life beautiful for them. And she makes them become proud of themselves. At the end of the film, the kids get to speak to Neve Deese, her name is, the woman who hid Anne Frank. And a boy gets up and says, "You're my hero." And she just very calmly says, "Oh, no, I'm not a hero. I just did what I had to do." And she says, you don't need to make big, drastic changes, be in a protest, run a rally. It's the small things in life, those little acts of kindness. Those are what matter the most. I think it just comes back to the human dignity. We may not be able to change everyone's minds, but I think if you have a more positive attitude in life and changing yourself, you're going to get much further in life, and you're going to be better to everyone around you.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful message, and again, I think it just points to the power of pop culture when done with heart and integrity, and obviously an artistic sensibility. It can really send a powerful message. And again, I never want to censor people. They can say what they want to say, but I think the crudeness of the message and the lack of decorum sometimes leaves them open for criticism. But, well, Jane, thank you so much. And again, Jane has been sort of emailing me back and forth behind the scenes, and that's why I wanted to have her on the show. We may have her back again when we have sort of another conversation we want to share with all of you listeners. But Jane, thank you so much. Keep consuming pop culture. Keep being smart about it, and keep speaking out in your own inimitable way. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
My hit tip of the week is Itsy Bitsy. Yeah, it's a horror movie about spiders, and you're going to have to look past the film's really silly, really retro poster. It's not terrible. It's actually kind of fun. It just has nothing to do with the film you're about to see. The story follows a single mom who has 2 kids, and she's moving her kids to a different part of the country, a quieter place, where she's going to work as a nurse for an ailing man who is having trouble getting around the home. But this man in particular likes rare artifacts, the kind that often come with curses attached to them. And I have to say, this movie starts badly. I wanted to turn it off, and I paid for it. I think you'll have the same impulse when you watch a few minutes of it, but wait, don't do it. It gets better and better. And eventually it becomes a character study about the young mom who's really struggling, trying to make ends meet, trying to stay sane. And then a huge spider enters her house and tries to kill her family. Now, the film has really good performances, and what I liked about it the best, perhaps, is the practical effects on display to make this spider come to life. The director actually worked in special effects, and he's kind of switching over to behind the scenes, and I think he does a pretty good transition here. Itsy Bitsy is available right now on video-on-demand services, and as an alternative to the usual horror fare, I recommend it.
Political Spirits, the weekly conservative podcast that says the left and right should have a few drinks and talk. The only podcast that intersperses commentary with the sound of pouring alcohol. Host Franklin Rye, an experienced governmental affairs professional, offers analysis, commentary, and conservative solutions mixed in with amusing anecdotes about the sausage-making process. Ever wonder how democracy is like a Chevy Suburban? Did the Beatles really write conservative songs? How a Democrat politician is like the Arquillians in Men in Black. Add to that occasional historical episodes with a patriotic bent, kept at 30 minutes or less, perfect for a commute, and you have a podcast recipe to serve conservatives, political news and opinion junkies, and those who just wonder how on earth we reached the point where so many in our country think patriotism is a dirty word. Please join us at Political Spirits. That's politicalspirits.libsyn.com or on Twitter at Franklin Rye.
Brian Hayner knew he'd be a guitar slinger from a very early age. Just one of those things where you just get a sense of where you're going to be in life. And he's lived up to that dream for decades, touring and performing session work like a true rock and roller. Then he decided to switch gears and embrace comedy in his act. He got the attention of a comedy superstar. You may know him, Jeff Dunham. Pretty big name. Toured the world with him, and all of a sudden, Brian Hayner is not just a guitar slinger, he's a comedian too. Now he's an in-demand comic who sings some very funny songs along the way, and he just so happens to be a conservative, and that's where the trouble and the opportunity starts. On the plus side, he's been part of the recent Deplorables comedy tour, and now he's about to launch the Eagles of Liberty tour alongside Chad Prather, Reno Collier, and Michael Loftus. And if those names sound familiar, well, they're funny guys, and they've all been previously on this podcast. So, still, that quartet is facing some pretty serious harassment for simply leaning right. They're not acting crazy. They're not saying things that are outrageous. They're just embracing Trump and embracing conservative views. And that's, as they say, problematic. Brian has some of the ugly details about what they've faced and what he's faced in particular coming up next. I hope you enjoy my conversation with a very funny guy, Brian Hayner. Well, Brian, I heard you say something on stage, which I'm going to guess is true. You said that you heard a Beatles chord, a riff, and that was sort of the starting point for your love of music and obviously guitars in particular. Is that a true story? And maybe tell me a little bit about as a kid falling in love with the guitar, because I sense that's where it all began.
Yeah, that's really it. I think for a lot of musicians my age, I think that first Beatle, when you saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they they went into, Hard Day's not Hard Day's Night. I think that was I Want to Hold Your Hand was that open kind of thing that they did. And all the girls were screaming. And I was I think I was about 6 years old at the time. But the music was amazing, obviously. But I also liked the fact that all the chicks were screaming. I was like, I could get into that. It's funny, but it's true. Even at 6, it was like that wasn't lost on me. That it's like these guys are getting some cool attention from all the right people.
It's funny. My son, I guess he saw the Austin Powers movie a year or two ago, and one of the things he took away from me is, Dad, the girls are chasing him all over. So even as a young boy, that has a certain appeal. So I totally get that. But now, did you start playing at a younger age, or how did the talent side of things, which obviously is here, how did that kind of play out as a kid?
Yeah, there was a lot of music in my family. Some uncles. I had an uncle that played guitar in some of the big bands back in the 40s. And my mom was a musician, not a professional musician, but she was, certainly she played piano and cello, and she sang, and ever since she was a kid. And so we always had music in the house. My dad played a little guitar, some harmonica, so we were always singing. They taught me how to sing harmony. And so, yeah, I started at a really early age. I think I started picking up the guitar at 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. And like anything else, I just fooled around with it for a few years, and then really got bit by the bug when I was maybe 10 or 11. Right in there. And then it just became part of me. From that point on, I'd take the guitar to school. I'd play it at lunch. I'd play it on recess. It was like I was that guitar nerd. And fortunately at the time, if it would have been any other instrument, I probably would have got beat up. But the time, during the 60s, the late 60s, that when the Beatles and the Stones and all that stuff were happening, I'd go to school and play the guitar, and I was playing like Beatles stuff and Stone stuff. And so naturally the girls were all gathered around. So I wasn't a nerd. I was just kind of cool, but in a sad way, it's the only way I could garner any attention.
Gotcha. Now, obviously your family had the musical chops. It was part of your growing up, but there's a difference between playing guitar and then saying, hey guys, I'm going to make a career out of this. Did your family support you when you kind of made that decision, or was it a little bit, hey, couldn't you be an accountant or a doctor or something like that?
Yeah, no, my family couldn't have been better. Okay. My mom and dad bought me instruments. They encouraged me. My dad's whole thing was just be good at something. Mm-hmm. Just, don't waste your time and be good at something. And whether that's, whether you sell storm doors in Iowa or you're a guitar player, whatever it is, just be good at it. Be the best that you can possibly be at it. And if you do that, chances are you'll be able to, make some sort of a living at it. And so, yeah, I was very encouraged, very blessed to have the family that I had, brothers and sisters that encouraged me and helped me out. My older brother played guitar, and so he taught me along the way as well. And it worked out. It obviously worked out well. I started doing little birthday parties and gigs when I was 12 or 13. And then by the time I was 15, I was in clubs. And then 17, 18, I started working in studios and got a record deal when I was 20. And so, yeah, it went, there was no other. It happened when I was so young that I never felt like there was a choice. Yeah. Almost. You know what I mean? It was just like, this is what I was going to do, and I was going to figure out how to do it. And then fortunately, like I said, I was blessed with enough talent that I could actually do it professionally.
Huh, no plan B required there. Now you're playing the guitar professionally. You've got a career going. At some point, there's a comedy itch that needs to be scratched. Can you talk about that transition? Because there aren't a ton of guitar comedy slingers, I guess you could say. You're in that elite group. What happened there?
Yeah, it was fairly organic. I've always bounced around a little bit. I've always been in music, but I played studio guitar. Then I had a record deal, and then I scored, a couple of movies and wrote songs. I always kind of bounced around within the music business just to keep things interesting. It wasn't just, I guess the guitar is the constant, but I would get bored if that was all I had. Yeah. And so I started writing songs. I actually went to Nashville and hooked up with a couple of good songwriters in Nashville. We started writing songs and plugging songs. And I found that when you're presenting a song or presenting a group of songs, if you open with something funny, mm-hmm. it gets their attention. They're like, oh, this guy's cool. He's got a sense of humor. I get it. And then they'll listen to your serious stuff. And so, unfortunately, they loved the comedy stuff. I got known around Nashville as the guy that wrote the funny songs, and it sort of, one thing led to another until I really got pretty good at just writing, funny original songs. And I was sitting in with a band here in LA, some friends of mine, and they said, hey, you should do one of your songs. And I think I did Carney Man. I think I sang Carney Man, and this guy approached me after the set. He walked up and he goes, hey, have you ever thought of doing comedy? And I'm like, now this is literally, I'm 45 years old at this time. Uh-huh. This is, and this guy comes, hey, we're going to make you a star, kid. It's like, yeah, I've been down that road a couple of times. So he said, no, I'm serious. If you want to do comedy, just can you put together 10 minutes? And so I said, well, yeah, I guess so. And then I thought, why not? It'll be, if I bomb, it'll be a funny story, and it's just a life experience. Well, what the heck? And I know I can be funny for 10 minutes. And so I'll just do a couple of songs. And so he calls me literally the next day and says, okay, you're opening every night this week for Lisa Lampanelli at the Improv. And I was like, who is this guy? And it turns out he was like the biggest comedy manager in the world. Oh, and he was managing Jeff Dunham at the time, which I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So I went in, and the worst thing that possibly could have happened. And that is that I absolutely killed. I did 10 minutes and just killed. And I thought, this is easy. This is a piece of cake. I had no idea what was in store. And, so then one thing led to another. I spent about a year doing that, just opening for different acts around LA. And then I got the call from the manager that Dunham was looking for somebody to add some music to the show, and he wanted to do a Christmas album. Could I write some songs? Could I back him up on stage? And I thought, that I think that'll be fun.
And it was, for sure. And obviously a very fruitful collaboration. Real quickly, I understand when you first started doing sort of the transition, you did some naughtier songs, and it seemed easy, but then you thought, I can't keep doing this because I may have to perform for maybe more G-rated audiences. Talk about that switch. I thought that was fascinating, just the kind of how you kind of changed gears like that.
Well, I think in the beginning, the thing that, with comedy, it's like you can say anything. That's what you think. Yeah. That's what intrigued me, is like, I can say anything. It's like, well, no, you can't. First of all, if you're an opening act, the word supporting comes into play. You are a supporting act. You're there to support that artist. And like I said, the first week I did comedy was Lisa Lampanelli. And so I cursed and I sang dirty songs and loved it. And Lisa didn't care. Yeah. And then the next week I'm opening for John Panette. If you remember him. Yes, great comedian, completely G-rated. And I'm getting ready to go on stage, and John goes, this is a G-rated show. And I'm like, I laugh. I go, yeah, right. He goes, no, there's no cursing in the show whatsoever. And I was like, well, so I went up on stage and I struggled and pretty much just sucked out loud. And so he actually switched me out. He called, management the next day and said, look, can you get me somebody else? This guy is not an opening act that I want in my show. It's just not cutting it. And that's when it dawned on me, holy cow, I have to be a chameleon. And then the more I got into it, and exercising those muscles, I realized that 90% of what you do, if you want to be successful, 90% of what you do has to be clean. I mean, you can get away with some dirty stuff here or there, and that's fine. But if you want to get on TV, if you want to get on a big tour like the Dunham tour, you've got to be squeaky clean. And with Dunham, I couldn't even say crap. It was like, that was reserved for him. He said a couple of curse words, and almost none, but he would say a couple of curse words, but that was his call. He knew where he could do that, and it wouldn't alienate his audience. But I wasn't allowed at all to curse. And like I said, you exercise those muscles and you start realizing that you were depending on curse words to be funny. And that's an old, I learned this from another comedian. Take the curse word out of a joke. If it still gets a laugh, you have a joke. If it doesn't get a laugh, you don't have a joke. You just got a shock curse word in there to make people laugh,
Yeah.
So,
and that's something I've noticed
there's
in
a big learning
the last couple of years. a lot of movie scripts have really been profane, and I'm not upset by that, but it's very clear that they're using those curses as the crutches to try to get you to laugh, and it's not always working out that way. Now, you kind of made, I guess you could say, another transition from being a guitarist to a comedy guitarist, and now you're being sort of a right of center personality. Was that as organic as the other transitions in your career?
Well, yeah, in a sense, I've always been, I voted for Reagan when I was, 20 or whatever, 21. So I've always been a conservative, but, or now I consider myself a libertarian really now, but still that leans way on the conservative side for me. And, so I was out of comedy, comedy for me. After I left Dunham, I went out and did, I think a year or two I headlined comedy clubs. And it got to the point where I was getting so many complaints about stuff that wasn't even edgy, that I felt like was pretty middle of the road. And people were, like either complaining or walking out or whatever. And I couldn't do colleges. And so it just wasn't fun. And so I quit, went back to just playing guitar and having a great life. And then I oddly enough, the same manager calls me last November and says, "Hey, I know you're conservative, and there's a show called, there's this Deplorable show, and they want somebody to come in, play some guitar. They got some girls singing. I offered you up, said you'd be perfect." And so I was like, well, that's kind of intriguing. I didn't realize what a bold move it was. It was just going to be fun. But this country is so divided right now, and everybody's, and you almost have to be. It's like if you don't guard yourself, they just eat away at those rights. They just seem to want to, all we want is bump stocks. All we want is all we want is that. And pretty soon, no, we're back with muskets. That's what they want. And so, and I didn't realize it at the time because I was just having fun. But yeah, it was an easy transition for me because it was honest. And I think if there's anything about art that's important, that's it. You have to be honest, because the public will smell it if you're not. And for something like this, I don't know why anybody would want to go out and do conservative comedy if it wasn't in their heart.
Yeah,
because
that's a choice you make.
It is not an easy road, and it's cost me quite a few gigs in the music world.
I want to hear about that in a minute, but I want to go back to, you mentioned before that you were getting complaints about your act for very sort of benign stuff. Can you remember any examples of something where people complain and you're thinking, oh my goodness, that's pretty milquetoast?
Yeah, well, stuff like, I do like Fist Fight at the Waffle House or something. I mean, just something like really pretty much straight ahead. But there's a line in it about the girl has acne-ridden crystal meth skin or something. There's one line like that, and that made a few people mad. Just like, how can you make fun of people that have a drug addiction? And then it's like, it's just a joke, guys. I'm not making fun of drug addictions. And just little things like that you would think we should be able to laugh at. We should be to just, and I have friends, obviously in the music business, I have some friends that are addicted. I take it seriously, but we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And also you're painting a scene, you're using characters, and you need the flexibility as an artist to tell those stories and to kind of get attacked for this and attacked for that. Then when you go back to the studio, you're writing a song, you're thinking, well, what can I say?
Well, exactly. And then you can't be, and then it goes back to what I was saying. You can't be honest. Mm-hmm. Now I have to, you start making a case for your audience, and you can't do that. You have to, the first thing, Robert Frost, a brilliant quote that he said, "No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader." Mm-hmm. And if something is funny, if I'm doing something funny, it has to make me laugh. It has to make, oh my God, can I say this? This is hilarious. That goes down on paper. And if it doesn't make me laugh when I sing the song, like 2 or 3 times through, if I'm still not laughing at the parts where that are funny, mm-hmm. I change it until it does make me laugh, and I can see that it's really funny. It has some staying power. That's where I start. And then obviously you go to the audience, and if they laugh at different spots, you might have to tweak a little bit.
Gotcha.
because obviously you're trying to entertain. But yeah, it has to start with honesty from you, and you can't start like what would this audience like, or what would that person like. That's just a rabbit hole that I certainly don't want to go down.
Yeah, and I've spoken to so many comedians over the years, and they say, listen, the stage is my workshop. I will workshop a joke until I get it right. So if you tell a joke one night and it doesn't kill, maybe if you change the inflection, maybe change a word or two, and all of a sudden you got a great bit. But you've got to have the room to roam to kind of try things out. And without that, you're in trouble. I think you and I spoke maybe a few months ago about you losing gigs, which you kind of alluded to just a couple seconds ago. Can you expand on that? Because I think this is important, and this isn't just, hey, I disagree with your politics. It's where the rubber meets the road in a very bad way. Talk about what you've experienced when you embraced being right of center and how that impacted your career.
Yeah, well, first I got a couple of calls from, I got a call from this one producer that I worked with a lot. And he said, are you sure you want to do this, dude? You've got a great reputation in this business. And when this gets out, he says, right now it's, nobody knows you're doing this. But if you're like on Fox News and stuff, people see your face. It's like, are you sure you want to do it? And I go, yeah, I want to do it. I don't, I'm not going to live my life being afraid of what I believe in.
Was he being friendly, like he was trying to help you, or was it being like a warning, you think?
He was being friendly. And then I was probably working for him. I don't know, maybe he was one of my bigger employers. I was probably working for him 2 or 3 days a week. Mm-hmm. And I haven't worked with him now in 6 months. So he never said, look, I can't use you, but he pretty much just ghosted me. Just like the phone stopped ringing and I just don't work for him anymore.
So you were working for how long were you working for them up until that point?
10 years.
Wow. 10 years,
so
fairly steady.
10 years, yeah.
Weekly. And then it's over.
Yeah. And there's been a few like that just, you just get ghosted because they don't tell you. This guy actually was, he was upfront enough to say, to at least give me a warning shot.
Yeah.
But most of the guys, they just, when this all came out, is just like the phone stops ringing and you go from working 5 days a week, 6 days a week to working, 1 day every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, at my age, I'm in a position where it doesn't really matter. I'm kind of doing it more for fun now. And so, I'm not worried about the mortgage payment, but
but it does matter. It does matter. And by the way, you're not going on stage and saying racist, sexist, homophobic. You're just telling jokes that are right of center. I want to, let's let that be clear. You're not being outrageous and crazy and irresponsible. You're just leaning to the right in your presentation on a tour that leans to the right. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, this isn't Chappelle, and I love the Chappelle special, but he's definitely, pretty crazy edgy, and he should be. That's what Chappelle does. But no, one of my songs is, I was writing a song about AOC, and I was trying to write jokes and be jokey, and it was just kind of not landing. And so I did a little, got on the internet, Googled her, just looked at, and I said, that's it. All I have to do is quote her. So I wrote a 3-minute song of just her quotes, and it's the funniest thing in my show. It's the funniest thing in the act. People scream because I just say verbatim. I literally quote her and just say what she said. So that's not racist or edgy or anything. I'm just saying what this lady says.
Gotcha. Now, you were on the Deplorables tour for a while, and now there's a new tour, the Eagles of Liberty, with Chad Prather, Michael Loftus, Reno Collier, who, by the way, were all guests on the show. Talk a little bit about, I don't know if I've got the full story here, but was there conflict about naming the tour MAGA, but it didn't work out? Or what, is there a reason for the name situation?
Yeah, we went through a couple of variations there, but yeah, we were trying to land on something that explained what the tour was. And at some point I threw out, why are we tap dancing around this? Let's just call it the MAGA tour. Let's just dive in. That's what it is. Let's just call it that. And so everybody laughed and they thought about it and said, you know what? you're right. That's what we're doing. Let's just do it. And so it turned out that that was a less than bright move, because the Facebook and Twitter shadow banned anything that has to do with, if MAG is in the title, you get 12 viewers instead of 10,000. So they won't, tweet it out to all your following. Facebook won't let you buy ads for it. It just goes on and on. And then the clubs, frankly, and I don't blame them, but the clubs, a lot of these, improvs and Funny Bones and all of these comedy clubs, they're in urban areas in any city. Mm-hmm. Now, they'll have more conservative comedies, comedians come in, but the club location will be downtown. And they don't want to put a big MAGA poster in the window with a flag on it saying this comedy tour is coming, because they're afraid that, somebody's going to throw a brick through the window. And they have a point. Somebody probably will. And so they were like, no, we can't, advertise you. We can't put your posters up. We can't say anything. You can just come in and do the show. So it was kind of doomed from the start. And so we said, let's move on to something that's maybe a little more clever, a little more subtle. Uh-huh. And so we came up with the Freedom to Laugh tour, but we are the Eagles of Liberty. So you think of it like a band name. The four of us are the Eagles of Liberty, and we're going out on our like the Eagles Hell Freezes Over tour. We're the Eagles of Liberty, and it's the Freedom to Laugh tour.
Gotcha. Those anecdotes you just shared, was that what your management sort of reached out to the clubs, and that was the feedback? How did you hear those things? Because it's interesting.
Well, we found out ourselves. We did a couple of shows, and we got there, and on the marquee, it said what was, the act that was there the night before and the act that was going to be there tomorrow. And nothing about us. No, not a poster in the window. And I'm like, what's going on? Usually the night of the show, you have something on the marquee, got a poster up. And so I inquired politely to management, and they said, well, let me find out. Let's see what's going on. And that's exactly what they came back with. It's like, dude, nobody's going to put MAG in the window. And further than that, several places wouldn't even book us. There were like, theaters and places that just said, no, we won't book any show that with MAGA in the title. We don't want any part of that. So yeah, we were starting to get turned down from actual clubs and theaters.
I'm just amazed. I mean, I hear these stories, but it still amazes me. But let's switch gears to something more positive. The show itself, obviously, 4 different comedians. I've seen Steve McGrew in the past. He's been on Deplorables, and I've seen Chad Prather, and their act isn't political at all. Now, they may have evolved their routine, but when you see the Eagles of Liberty, is it sort of a lot of political humor, a dash of it? How would you kind of describe the overall tone? And then we'll get to your specific act.
It's about maybe half and half. Uh-huh. I would probably now 75%. Okay. That's kind of where we're going with it. Chad has become more political over the past year or so. I think his act has become much more political. Reno fills that slot where he talks about middle America family values. Yeah. And his is very personal. His is very much about his life, his family, growing up, going to a military school, and he's living in Tennessee, and so that's the part of the show that's really not political. And I think you have Michael Loftus comes out, and it's like a history lesson. That guy's like an encyclopedia, mm-hmm. and he just like boom, 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 boom comes out with all of these great political things, and he brings history into it, and obviously I come out and I'm all music, yeah. So I do my funny songs, and then you get Chad, like I said, who is that Will Rogers type homespun. Middle America humor, but he definitely adds some politics to it.
Gotcha.
And then Reno is like virtually no politics. And I think it works really well, because by the time by the time you get sort of the end of the show, you're like, how many jokes can you make about Nancy Pelosi? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, what else you got? And then it just kind of reaffirms, I think that Reno's part of the act reaffirms why we're doing this. He does talk about the church and family values and all the things that are important to so many Americans. And it puts a nice bow on the show.
Yeah, and just also reminds us why you're all there in the first place. Besides your AOC song, any other song titles you can tease before we let you go?
Oh, let's see. We've got a nice sing-along with about Nancy Pelosi. Uh-huh. And let's see. I opened with a song called "We're Gonna Make 'Em Cry Again in 2020," and got a song about. I have a great song about Jussie Smollett, and I thought that when I wrote that song, I thought, well, this has a shelf life of 2 weeks.
Good luck.
And boy, he is the gift that just keeps on giving. About every 2-3 weeks, he's back in the news. I'm like, yeah, I can still sing my Jussie song.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. But Brian, I really appreciate you joining the HitCast. You can see Brian live as part of the Eagles of Liberty comedy tour coming to a stage near you. And visit brianhainer.com for info on Brian, as well as how to pick up some of his records and his novels. You're a novelist as well. Maybe next time we talk, we'll talk more about that. The books are Carney Man and Ginny Rebs, so another side of your talents. Brian, thank you so much. I appreciate what you do. I'm sorry that you've had to go through so much crap. I'll use that word. I'm allowed to. It's my podcast. And we look forward to seeing you live.
Oh, it's all going to be worth it in the end. Thank you so much, Christian.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.